Hey everybody, I'm Pearson. Thanks for taking a minute to come here. What I hope is essentially pretty obvious and may serve as a reminder, which would be great. And it's, but might come across as a bit of a rant too. First off, I'm a little intimidated because I know who you are for the most part, and I've enjoyed many of your beers in your tap room, so I'm grateful for your attention to something I think is important because while we, as an industry, grow, I still think we're the tone setters for what's to come, and we're pushing back against an over-homogenization of consumption. There's a lot of competition from big Goliath corporations and companies out there, but what we do contributes so much to the culture and identities of our communities. And that to me is very exciting, in the micro manufacturing and the taproom space. So hopefully, where this talk goes, and we can ask questions at any point, kind of echoes already what you're doing, and if you can augment, great. So I get to travel quite a bit, not just for work, but personally, because I have family scattered all across the country, and but I stock brands in breweries and tap rooms and new beers on the social feed. The social feed is such a hook, and it's, while it's sometimes pretty horrible, it's a good way to learn about some new places. And so I'm going to tell a couple stories about visiting a brewery in the DC area. I'm not going to tell you who it is, because that's irrelevant, but it was a picture like this that had been on my mind because I knew I was going to go visit my sister-in-law. And so it's like a 7-hour drive, and when my wife and I got there with our kids, she's like, "Can you go get some beer?" And I was like, "Perfect, no problem. They absolutely know where I want to go, because I really want that creamy ice cream whip foam beer. It's been a long drive, and a screaming long drive with toddlers." So I pull up the address. I know where it is. It's a part of town I've been to, but I haven't visited this particular place before. So I'm stoked. And I pull up, open the door. It's right between, they were open around noon, so it's close to 4:30. So it's just about that happy hour thing. The place is not very busy. There's a couple of tables, but the bar is oddly empty. So I figured, good enough. Maybe I'll get some attention and I'm gonna have a good time. And I need to pick up 2 cases. The retail cooler's beautiful. I failed to mention that when I opened the door, that gorgeous smell of wort hit me and reminded me of why I wanted to work in beer in the first place. It took me back to 20 years ago or more when I first visited the Brooklyn Brewery, and that smell, that boiled wort, it's nothing like it for me, and it still inspires me every day I walk into the brewery. Anyway, so I go to the bar, and there's a kind of a congregation of what I assume to be employees. There's an open kitchen space there, and they're kind of chit-chatting, looking at phones, and I think, well, maybe they're having kind of like a pre-meal, getting their marching orders and focusing on where they're gonna go for their evening service. So I'm waiting at the bar. I look behind these beautiful side pour tap handles, and above see the beer that I recognize from the social feed, and it's winking at me now, and my liver's aching, and I just need this. I need a beer, man. You know what I mean? You've been in that spot. So anyway, I'm waiting, and the minutes are kind of getting a little bit long, and I'm not looking for a bell to ring, and so I carefully, kind of look at the text, and I answer a couple texts and look around just to make sure people are still knowing I exist. No attention, so minutes are ticking away, getting divisible by 5 now, and eventually somebody comes walking down, not a big bar, but big enough, and they go right by me. I was like, oh, now it feels like I'm back in high school, when my flies up, which it might be right now, because that's typical for me, and I just felt really out of place. Eventually, I do get to order a beer. The bartender comes out and says, "What do you want?" And I order the Pilsner, and they just say $12 and walk away. So it's at least I'm excited now, because I'm gonna get what I came here for. I didn't get that. I got a dirty glass and a beer with very, very little foam. And it was just handed to me carelessly. And that moment right there just completely disappointed me, to say the least. And for $12, not that big of a deal, but I didn't even want to bother going to look at the retail cooler at that point. I finished the beer, a lot less time it took to get it, and I found where they were sitting again back in their conversation that night. I just took the glass there and paid cash and cut out. And on my way out, I made sure that there was a place that I did know, the little kind of like package store beer bar right around the corner was open. And when I got in there, the place was packed. It was full of people. And I found a place at the bar, had a beer, actually had that brewery's beer that I just left, and even bought a 4-pack at this other place, and then picked up everything else that I knew was dependable enough for our weekend trip. So that was really disappointing, and it kind of got me thinking about what happened. Why? Was it me? I don't think it was necessarily me, but that was not a really great representation of that brand. And it's just careless. And it was too bad, because the beer was passable. Now, conversely, another kind of long weekend, this past Thanksgiving, my wife and I were traveling across the state of New York back to the Capital District. We spent Thanksgiving in Buffalo. And she was getting kind of hungry. My father lives in the Finger Lakes. And, I could certainly use beer in the middle of the drive. So we found a place we know is pretty good. And so we all met there. There's now 5 of us. And again, Saturday after Thanksgiving, very, very busy day. You could tell when we pulled up to that brewery restaurant that they had the wood put to them from the lunch service, and they were going to probably see it for dinner too. So it's chaotic, is what I'm saying. It was, tables were being bussed, checks were being dropped, people were filtering in and out. The bar was still full. Games were on the TV. Anyway, we were sat immediately, and the kids were given little crayons and stuff to occupy them. And then when the server came to take our order, our beer order at least, she took it, but while she was taking it, she reached into her apron and pulled out reams of stickers and handed it to the kids. And in that moment, that just act of kindness, that act of hospitality, treating the children as people, I felt there was like a shift in the dining experience. It was a dynamic movement that I knew instantly that we were going to be well taken care of for our experience there, and we certainly were. We ordered far more beers than we probably should have, and bought a couple of cases we didn't really have room for in our cart. But that act of kindness really set the tone, and it turned out that woman, that server, that really great hire, who was kind, pleasant, and caring, buys those stickers herself. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but it was just a simple act of hospitality that really set the whole tone of our experience there. So we still talk about it, and I still buy their beer, I still drink that brewery's beer, and every time I crack a can, I kind of think about that afternoon. So that's where I'm getting at. Your people are your brand. This is not a unique concept, but I have 3 things that I think about. Hire well, onboard exceptionally, and work collaboratively with your people. Hiring, many of you hire people frequently, and hopefully not too frequently, but don't necessarily judge a book by its cover, right? But in that cover sometimes is the resume too. I would much rather work with people who are pleasant, kind, and caring, and have that spark. So there's something about them that just, it's charming, and you want to be around them, and you want to work with them. And I think you can train people, for the most part, a lot of the qualifications that are needed to execute fully, but it's really that initial spark that draws me in and makes me want to spend time with them. So don't hire anyone you wouldn't want to run into the hallway at 3 in the morning. To me, that's kind of funny. But no matter what kind of company you run, your people are your brand. If you don't have good people, no amount of marketing, advertising, or PR are going to make up for it. So, interviewing. I have done some bizarre interviews in my really weird career. when I worked at Red Bull, I was interviewed 2 separate times in 2 separate locations, and then my first working interview with them was a weekend away at a tattoo and body art festival. So I was hired, but I wasn't necessarily fully matriculated into the organization. And that, I don't know if you've been in a room of, like a sealed room of just burning flesh, what that can smell like, and try and convince people to suck down an amino acid mental jolt. That was an experience, to say the least. So that was kind of working over. But I'm jumping around here because I'm still, I'm excited to share these stories with you. But we, in my experience, spending time talking to people in the interview process, you kind of get a sense of their personality, and moreover, to kind of drive into what's driving them to want to work for your organization, and assessing their core values, so that if they do matriculate into your onboarding, you can tell your story in a way that kind of turns those switches on of their core values, and there's just a much deeper alignment. When I feel like Browns took a flyer on me, so there was 3 6-hour interviews. One was 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours, yeah, and then the third one was like, are we doing this or not, And I certainly wasn't hired for the position that I'm in, because I think they noticed something in me, at least the 3 of the 4 people that were in charge of bringing me on board. Those 3 aren't with the company anymore, so you never know. But, onboarding. How many of you have a developed training program? Well, I could assume that, certainly from you. But I think the more time you invest in an onboarding program, it's truly that, an investment. And the more you can communicate and tell your story and get your folks indoctrinated into you, the better. Employee orientation center around and exists to help individual employees, but it's the company that ultimately reaps the benefits of this practice. And the culture, your company culture, is the single greatest impact on your whole thing. So training and onboarding should be looked at as an investment. And it's all about telling your story and aligning your organization's core mission with the employee's personal values. I took a flyer on a salesperson. I needed some help at the time, and this person was coming from an education background and hadn't had any experience in the direct kind of business-to-business selling relationship. But there was something about her that was remarkably interesting and charming. And again, many interviews, days of onboarding, and just working in the brewery, being around the brand, learning the story. When you hire a salesperson, it's really, really important to assess so much about them, and they're tasked with needing to tell so much information in a very, very quick moment, and be confident. And there's no real oversight either once they leave your building and are going out to represent you. So on our very first day, we're going to go out to about 12 accounts. So again, I was comfortable enough with her to know that she had something, but I was freaked out to see if she could pull it off. So we're going to do a bunch of days selling together and get acclimated. So the very first day we met at the tap room, and then we're gearing up to go do the 12 accounts, mix of on, off premise, some hard people to get in touch with and hard places to sell into. So she, on her way out, walks through the kitchen, grabs a quart container of soup and a metal spoon. So one of those plastic quart containers. And I personally don't care for soup. This talk is not about soup. So I was like, not too into the soup, but I figured eat it in the car and we'll get there. So about 20 minutes later, she's still eating the soup when we arrived at the account. But I was more concerned with making sure we had the pitch books and the beers were cold and we had the backpack full of beer, and we walk into the account. And I didn't notice until we got to the bar that she still had that fucking soup, the quart container of soup that she was eating, and she used it to get the attention. I mean, it's like a cardinal rule not to bring outside food or drink. It's like the most bizarre shit. But she put a line on the board. Her very first stop, her very first day out, not an hour off site. She's already putting it up on the board. So that knocked me out, and she soared from then on out. Just took a little bit of refinement, and then, like I had said back earlier, they don't check every box. Sometimes it's worth to take a flyer. And so I was able to refine the organizational skills and dial things in. And she was promoted through the company back in the front of house end, and not on the sales world, and has thus moved on quite well and has done extraordinarily well. So really proud of her. It's kind of funny, taking a flyer and the suit thing has always stuck with me. Working in concert with your people. Anyone know what this band is? You see it? That's Tool. And I thought, when I was thinking about this speech today, what rock and roll band came out of the gate fully formed? And yes, there's only been one replacement of a member, but I think it was replaced with someone very similar as the bass player. This band has been around for decades, and they are one full, complete unit. And that's through line is where I'm getting at with your people being your brand. It's the through line from the products you make all the way through to the execution of the service or the sales or whichever modality that you're in, if it's a combination or both. So excellent customer service depends entirely on exceptional employee experience. So the more you can nurture the people who represent you and work for you, and they are the ones who are going to be facing the customers, and they are that through line. They're the ones who are going to execute your brand promise. So working with your staff. I've had really great managers in my career and not so great managers. And this movie is a farce, if anyone's seen the film Waiting. Yeah, right? So you know about Dan. Has anyone worked for a guy like Dan? Or worked with in any org? Sure, right? So someone who can just, they only care about the spreadsheet and they're not really a leader. And there's so much of that, it's pervasive. And I think we're doing better about not having those people around our world, but it still happens from time to time. But I feel like showing by doing is the way to do it, and allow people to learn and work collaboratively, and be supportive, patient, and nurturing through that whole experience. So I see that in the companies that I've spent more time with, certainly, that this just sort of nurturing supportiveness and working with instead of dictating in some authoritarian manner has gone so much further than just... Anyway, I think you guys know what I'm saying about that. So as a brief little talk, in conclusion, take time to hire the right people. Don't just take flyers, even though I did bring up a story about that, but take time to find the right folks. And would much rather see a pleasant, charming, someone with a spark than someone who's just a robot and can check every box. Training well. During onboarding, I thought about 3 examples of major corporations, and I know the Disney company, not that I know anyone who works at Disney as a matriculated employee other than independent contractors on the music end. I think they show a film once you get into your very first day of orientation, and that film talks about like punctuality, cleanliness, your own personal hygiene, and I think they use that as a tool because people tend to walk out of the orientation right then and there, so they use that as a tool to kind of get further down the line. I know that Apple Computer has a huge indoctrination program. I was hired by Apple, by the way. I didn't work because I decided to go on tour with a punk band, so I'm here to talk about that instead. But their onboarding thing is really about nurturing innovation and collaboration of innovation. And then Google has a buddy system where you're buddied up with a more senior employee. That worked for me in a company I worked for quite some time. We was in a different department, but I had a buddy, And we developed a really great relationship, and through the sale of that company, where we both were let go, but and kept in touch long after. So those things are cool, and those are really good tools, and there's well-documented opportunities to be out there, which I would gladly talk more about at some point, right now or later in the day. But working collaboratively, show by doing. I think that's something I see has been successful in the organization that I work for now, and the turnover is not so severe due to that. Just everybody's there, we're accessible, we're patient, we're nurturing, and we focus on our employees and communicate and overly communicate with our people, and they feel so much more attached to what we're doing and can move mountains. So that's my thought here for the day. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Do you have any suggestions? I have some training material, like any sort of templates or guidelines, in developing, good onboarding structure or format, or any suggestions on how to jump off on something?
What would resonate with you?
I don't know. I think I'm so I don't have a good perspective, I don't think, because I'm so deep into everything.
Well, can you tell your story?
Yeah?
You can tell your story, right?
Yeah.
You tell the why you started, the why you got into it, what drove you there, your background before you came into this world, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I think start there. Yes, of course you could spend a whole course load of study on developing one, but I think bring it back to you. So start with your entire story. And it doesn't all have to come at once, by the way. You can do a little bit every few days and just be continually in contact with the people who are going to represent your brand promise. Now, it doesn't really give you probably exactly what you're looking for, but I think it's more about you, right? And so we like to be in tribes, right? We're connected with like-minded people, and I think that's going to be the key to your village.
But I think to elaborate on that a little bit, we've talked a little bit about, we have a kitchen, brewery and a kitchen. But,
Yeah.
A lot of times when I hire the front of the house, we'll team our mom with another, train with one of the other front of the house people, but, we kind of throw them in there, we give them some, information, and we kind of let that front of the house person train them. I think, just taking a minute to step back, and maybe the first day is like, you're gonna kind of walk around with the owner, and I'm gonna let, here's our beer, let's talk about the beer, I'm gonna take you back in the kitchen. By the way, we make all our own salad dressings and coleslaw dressing, and I make desserts, and everything is homemade, and just those things that they're not gonna necessarily learn when they're training with a front of the house person, but can help build our brand. I've had so many times when one of the front of the house said, "You make our own dressings?" I'm like, "Uh-huh." She's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." I'm like, "Yeah, but people know that. They know we."
That's precisely the thing. They need to know that.
Time to walk them around with you and making that important. The things that your front of the house isn't going to really teach them. They're going to show them how you pour your beers and how not to pour your beers or what it's walking by. But yeah, that might be a good thing to add to the training. Is kind of walking around with the owner.
Yeah, so I'm a big proponent of that management by walking around. I spend most of my days, not that I'm a manager of a huge team, but I walk around. I walk around both breweries, both tap rooms. I try and talk to everyone. I try and learn from everybody. That aspect of cross-training that you were sort of alluding to, I think, is so deep and can only bring a much greater benefit to you or your workforce there. Say you need to shift somebody over or you need somebody to cover, right? But that's amazing that not only do you make beer, but you make your own salad dressings and I hope it's branded and I hope, it's on your book and shit. Well, it doesn't matter, but you're small but mighty and you're impacting your community's culture. Such a huge part of that. I mean, people want to take things home that they had a great experience consuming, right? And they want to share it with their networks. And that's, once you get that line connected, that's a huge marketing asset that you didn't have to necessarily pay for, they paid you. and bought your products and want to share it with their network. So this is aspirational talk, but I definitely think you could spend more time, as you're allowed to. Don't leave it to like one day and then pass the buck on to, a more senior person. That senior person needs to feel as connected and be touched as well. Anybody else? Oh. So that's it. We're done. That's it. You guys are gonna nail it from here on out. I will gladly to answer more questions. I do feel like I did kind of gloss over a couple of things, but yeah, the more you can be in touch with your people, I think that sells it. Yes.
How do you have a staff, like your staff is a little, most of them have been around, most everyone in the company's worked there for 6+ years. And it's a small company, so it's second jobs for pretty much everyone except 3 people who work there.
Yeah.
Front of house manager, the head brewer, and our salesperson. Hey, Jordan. So it's everyone, we have part-time folks, whatever, 7, 8 part-time folks rotating through on a weekly basis, 1 shift a week, sometimes less. How do you, and the frustration, there's some huge frustration point sometimes trying to make people understand we need you to be a little more proficient in some of this information than you are. We understand this is your second job. If you all have full-time jobs elsewhere, you come here to earn extra cash, whatever reason you're here, whatever. But sometimes trying to explain, our head brewer puts a lot of time and effort and his energy. He's making these things and it's his product, and we are presenting something that somebody else makes to the customer, and trying to understand, always looking at someone else for an answer on something, or not, even if you don't necessarily drink beer and don't really care too much about that, but understanding you need to know the information, that is part of being here, being here for so long. You need to know this because you're presenting this product to someone, and it can't just be
So how often do you do just tastings of the products with your team? You do a pre-meal?
Maybe quarterly.
Quarterly, right. So how often do you bring out new beers and new products? You guys have that gorgeous space too. That's expansive.
Yeah, in the summer. Truly new stuff we've never made before.
Uh-huh.
Maybe once a quarter.
So I just think every time you have a new product, you need to send an internal memo, right? And then get everyone to taste it who can taste it. Even if the shifts are staggered and they're coming in part-time and they have other gigs, they're still choosing to have Wolf Hollow be its other gig, right? So spend the time, take the time, maybe take the initiative and start to just be more present about new products and the attributes of that. That's something that we can all do a better job of, by the way. That's, unless it becomes a standard practice, one of your standard operating procedures, which I think it should be. For example, we tend to release a new beer every week and send notes and make our staff at least try it if they're of age, because we are in a similar situation where it's transient. But these efforts will chop down on turnover. For the most part, that's the ultimate goal, right? Because that is so time consuming. And so the more you can do to just be in touch, communicate, so vital. Yes?
And then Pearson, sort of feeding off that, how do you get this engagement? I can communicate till I'm blue in the face, but if folks are part-time or they're not as excited as maybe I am about products, or that I'm trying to get them on the same level because to sell the brand, but it just seems sometimes I'm sending stuff out and the only people who read it are the folks who already know, other
Sure.
makers. So
Do you
just
have-
getting that engagement with over communication. Like what are some like?
So I dabble into industries. I'm doing this part-time as I'm leaving other industries. And one thing we do in the software industry, which I think may or may not apply here, is we have levels of software developers, for example. And we've made it really clear to go from a junior to a mid-level developer, which involves a pay increase. You have to have this level of skills and knowledge and exhibit them on a daily basis. And the exhibiting on a daily basis is key, because if you learn but don't apply, well, what good is that to me? And maybe you could tie it to small salary steps. You know, I've been thinking in mind, trying to get I have a really small tap room with only 2 employees, but trying to get the lead bartender who's there 5 days a week to get her Cicerone, for example, and tie that. She kind of wants an increase, say, you know, if you get to that level, but then communicate that on a daily basis. Then when you get that, I want to see you engaging with customers to stay at this level. If you're not engaging and sharing this information and talking about a beer, you're going to go back to the level you were at.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Chris. Yeah.
I think that we don't treat our part-time employees any differently than our full-time employees from an onboarding, training, and hold them accountable. They're just on the schedule less. So if you have someone who's not tasting the beer or not engaging with the customers, then get rid of them. Like there shouldn't be, at least, and we live in the middle of nowhere, like it's hard to find employees, so we don't do it a lot, but the only thing different between part-time and full-time is the amount of times their name's on the schedule. Everything else is the same, they're held to the exact same standards.
Yep, I agree. So Teresa, back to your point, it's for me, it's constant communication about the new products. And I know that these younger kids who don't drink beer kind of disengage quickly, but I still come after them and I still reach out and engage with them. But I think it's the approach too. You know, it's not like I'm not like a teacher with a ruler. You know, I have a passion for it, and then I think that, you know, I see it in you guys too. I mean, I think you guys can completely pull it off and have great success at it. Just keep doing it. Yes.
Something we try to do really small too, 3.5 barrels. I had the bartenders, we do like bartender series where I'm like, what kind of beer do you like? What would you like to see in a beer? Let's make a beer together. They came and brewed the session. So then now I find that they're more engaged in talking about the brewing process because they actually got to see
Yep.
what the brewing process was. Before that, it was like these two people were just kind of like clocking in, clocking out. And then like once they saw that I did it to one bartender, now they're all like, oh, when can I make my beer? So it did help with that. And they're part-time too. I only have 2 full-time. It's me and my head bartender, and the other ones are part-time. But they're like the kid who's been there for a while. He's like, oh, are we ready? We're ready. Like, so it does excite them more to be involved in that. So
Love that. Yeah, man.
Kind of going off of that, we're trying to do a lot of beer knowledge and education with our staff. And to go off that, you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of these staff, we try to do role plays with them. We try to, say you come in, it's like, oh, I'm an 80-year-old grandma trying to buy beer for my grandson's birthday. What do you think you would like? And it kind of helps them to problem solve, working through the different lists of things that we have.
Yeah.
But to go off of that too, I've also invited our front house staff in the beginning of the day, like if we're brewing, if we're doing a transfer, come back into the brewery, see what we're doing, get some knowledge of that. This is what freshly soured wort smells like, so it kind of gives them a sense of that process and helps them to understand better so that they can feel more comfortable and confident talking about that with customers later on too.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times people come in, we get a lot of blue collar guys in our bar, they'll come in and just be like, can I just get a light lager, can I get your Kolsch, something light, but they aren't just looking for something light, maybe they're looking for something that's not too beery or hoppy,
Right.
They're looking for something more malt forward, So kind of helping them to think more critically about this and ask these kind of questions so that you're not just burning through blonde all the time, So it's like, so kind of things like that too, we find we're
Great.
trying to implement a little bit too.
Great. Yes.
Another thing that we do that has been helpful is we have like a little library of both like different beer books, different cider books, some different cookbooks. We do a lot of like New York food. You know, we encourage our staff to kind of like, you know, take out a book here and there. If you want to help with kitchen, you know, if you have look through these, you know, cookbooks to be nice in the school, we want to try. So, you know, having like little resources like that, you know, there's no pressure, but, you know, they're there for you.
That's great. But again, I feel like you're making them do some homework too sometimes, so, yeah, I don't know. When they're in your space, you know, you need to touch that. I mean, it's great that if they take
You know,
initiative.
using it during, while they're there too, you know.
That's great.
Something, a tool while they're there.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else? Well, thanks again. I'm grateful for the time and attention. I truly am. And I love all your beers. Those are most of the ones that I've had, which is most of all of you. And then I'm coming for you.